Welcome, viewers and listeners, to CHP Talks. I'm here today with David C. Cooke from New Brunswick, and more importantly, from the Campaign Life Coalition. David was born and raised in Brampton, Ontario, graduated from Queen's University, and worked as an internet programmer for several years. After coming to faith in Christ, David went on to study the Bible at Toronto Baptist Seminary. He served in pastoral ministry in several churches in Ontario, and briefly as a missionary teacher in Honduras. In 2018, David took on the role of Executive Director of Citizen Go Canada. Many of you are familiar with that, an organization defending Christian, pro-life, and pro-family values. Over the last 3 years, David has served with Campaign Life Coalition as National Campaigns Manager, focusing on various life, family, and faith initiatives. David is married to Heather, his wife of 20 years. They reside in Baker Brook, New Brunswick, together with their 2 children. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Rod. It's good to be here.
Yeah, David is a repeat guest here, and thank you for taking the time to come on with us again. I'm just going to launch right into it. The reason for this particular time together is David's new book, Trudeau's MAiD Service. MAiD Service, Euthanasia Program, a Euthanasia Program for Canada. And very important topic. David, you work on all aspects of pro-life with Campaign Life Coalition, but this one is particularly about euthanasia and the death culture that is running amok, using doctors, believe it or not, to kill Canadian citizens. So I'll let you launch out, and then I'll have a few questions for you.
Yeah, I just wrote this book over the summer. I felt this is a particularly important time in this issue of euthanasia, doctor-assisted suicide, and basically murder. For a number of reasons. There are some issues, of course, that are very hot right now in terms of in the news. We're hearing about desire to expand euthanasia. There was a doctor just a week or 2 ago from Quebec, Dr. Louis Roy with the Quebec College of Physicians, who had actually proposed euthanasia for infants who are deformed or seriously ill. So we're hearing this in the news more. There is also supposed to be a 5-year review of the Euthanasia Program, which was legalized back in 2016. That review is very delayed. We're into year 6 now. And that review, which was supposed to evaluate, the whole program and basically put everything on the table, be willing to totally rework it or axe it if warranted. That whole review process has turned into an expansion process. It's all about how we can expand it and do more killing. And so that review is happening in Parliament right now as we speak, under the AMAD committee. And then, of course, because of Bill C7, which was passed earlier in the year, I believe, was in that bill, it allowed for the euthanasia of disabled Canadians who aren't dying otherwise. And it also said March 17th of next year that Canadians who are depressed, have a mental illness, that they will be eligible for euthanasia. So I just felt with all these things happening right now on this issue, in the news, of course, we've heard of some just egregious examples of euthanasia requests happening, or people being propositioned for euthanasia who didn't want it. I just thought this is a time we need to get out the message of what this really is all about. Trudeau's MAiD Service, that is really what it is. It's a whole killing regime. And we want to get it out so that we can hopefully raise awareness so that people can hopefully speak out and we can see this program stopped. or it's certainly not advanced anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was very glad. Thank you for sending me this copy of Trudeau's MAiD Service. I like to mention the title a few times because so people will remember it. And the book, of course, is available on Amazon. Later on, we're going to find out how people can get their own copy, either through Amazon or through you. But it starts, I want to point out, it's a small book. It's not a big book, just so people know that they're not, they should order it right away, because it's only going to take a short time, a good sit down with a cup of coffee or two, and they can get through this book. But it's jam-packed with information, and it goes back to the time when killing another innocent human being, even with their consent, was illegal, because it was considered murder. And when Bill C-14 came in, you point out in your book here on page 11, when it came in, the Justice Minister at the time, Jody Wilson-Raybould, who brought the bill in, she said this is a situation where one person actively and knowingly participates in the death of another. And she said, we normally criminalize and strongly condemn this conduct in all other circumstances. So they were admitting that they were crossing quite a boundary there. Right. Human life has always been protected by Canadian law until now.
Yes, it's remarkable. I came across that quote in the Hansard as I was looking, preparing some research for this book. And I thought, wow, that's quite an admission. She's saying this is criminal. It has been criminal. It's such an important principle to guard life, and especially for those who are vulnerable, or in a condition where they may be suggestible, or in a weak state, where people could take advantage of them, or they could feel they're a burden. In those situations especially, we need to protect the interests of those people and stand up for human life and the value of life, the dignity of life. And so to admit, they're changing the law, which I would say they can't change, because ultimately it's rooted in the Bible, the biblical precept, which is you shall not murder.
Yes. Very
fundamental, without any exceptions in terms of if someone's, if someone's vulnerable and weak and dying and sick, disabled, there's nothing. In fact, we've got to protect those people more.
Yeah. So the original legislation, of course, came about, and most of our listeners know this, but came about because of the Supreme Court, or the excuse was the Supreme Court decision in Carter, and then it was progressed to well, let's put it, that came out under the Harper government, the Conservative government, and there was some movement forward with it even then. It was not being resisted as strongly as it should have been by all concerned, especially the government in charge. There's the notwithstanding clause, other ways that it could have been resisted, but it came to pass very quickly once Mr. Trudeau became our prime minister in 2015. The next June, C-14 came into being, and like you said, it was going to be reviewed and examined for whether it was accomplishing what it was supposed to do, and secondly, whether it was doing more harm than it was intended to do. It was originally designed, and I don't justify this anyway, but the original, the way it was sold to the public, let's put it that way, was that it would be people who were at life's end, without hope, in extreme pain and suffering, no way to relieve the pain and suffering. Their death was reasonably foreseeable, whatever that means, days or minutes or whatever, and that they gave their full informed consent. Now, it has changed from that point. For instance, certainly bringing in any kind of action regarding children or infants. Infants cannot give consent, you point out in the book. They're not able to give consent, so that's one thing. And their death is not immediately foreseeable. Why do you think the slide is downhill? Why do you think once the door is open, there must be a principle involved why it changed from what it was said to be? And again, I don't justify the original intention either, but they didn't seem content to leave it there.
Right. Well, it's this principle of allowing one person to kill another innocent person. I mean, once you allow that, I mean, we're not talking about murderers. You know, you're not talking about capital punishment, which is still illegal in Canada. It was criminalized in 1976. But I mean, when you allow one human to kill another innocent human for whatever reason, you know, no matter how noble it may sound or compassionate it may sound, you open a door that you should never open. So on the one hand, you're opening a door, you're giving people a license to kill. But then on the other hand, you're looking at certain people and you're saying this group of people, they are a killable group of people. We can kill them. Yeah, okay, they have to give their consent. That's kind of, yeah, we're saying that for now. But as soon as you classify certain people as able to be killed, they're like a subhuman group now, you know, and so that your mindset changes. Society's mindset suddenly looks at humanity differently. We're grouping people into different groups of different classes, and we're saying some humans can kill other humans. Where this goes, I mean, we've seen examples in history, but it can go horribly wrong, much farther than anyone initially expects it to go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, if we back up a second and then get into modern history a little bit more, but the whole acceptance of abortion, you know, we know that we don't know the numbers because they don't report properly, but something like 100,000 babies a year killed in Canada. And that had been going on for quite some time when euthanasia was opened up. So there already was a classification of a group of human beings, those who had not yet been born, and that they were killable because they were, use the word fetus or some other term to, I mean, they just said tissue or whatever, but we know these are little human beings in the wombs of their mothers. And so by the time euthanasia comes along, it's just another step. And now they're taking more steps along the way. And you mentioned there are historical examples, like I'm sure you're thinking of the Holocaust and the medical experiments and the medical killing, which took place in Germany. And you have a very important piece of your work here deals with that, because it gets into the realm of money. And there's a reason to, you know, the Nazi regime thought it was worthwhile killing people who were costing money. I'm just going to hold this picture up. People may not see it that well, and if they're listening on the podcast, they won't see it at all. But there's a poster from Germany that's in your book that was telling people, the German people, look, this guy, this crippled person is costing you this much money. That's your money. And do you think that's a pretty big part of what's going on in Canada today?
Well, yeah, and the scary thing is that our politicians are not even afraid to come out and say that it's saving money. It is cheaper to kill someone rather than to provide hospital care, nursing care, which may last, you know, months, years, depending on the case. Yeah. Disability supports, home care. It is tremendously cost savings to offer euthanasia. Lethal injection takes care of the problem right away. And when you have a socialized healthcare system like ours, there's a huge incentive to push for this, just an institutional push towards it.
Yes. Yeah. So we already have seen cases of people being told, well, no, we can't treat you, but we can kill you. Basically, you can choose. Well, it's not much of a choice if they're refusing to treat you, but you can choose to have a doctor kill you if you would like that, and they'll get on that right away. Now, the original legislation also had a waiting period. They give people who were maybe going through a time of depression a chance to recover, maybe remember the value that they have to society and that they're here for a reason. But now that waiting period, is that next March when that's going to be dropped?
Well, it's a 2-track system now, I believe. I think it was this past March, it went to the 2-track where you have, if you are nearing death, whatever that means, of course, but if they determine you're nearing death, you can have euthanasia immediately, the same day, same hour, without a chance to repent, to reconsider, without the opportunity for family to intervene in any way. And then the other track is, if you're not nearing death, there is a mandatory waiting period still for those people who actually are not dying at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you see this? This expansion to the mentally ill. Of course, that's such a contradiction from, we often hear people talking about the need for more help for the mentally ill and so on, and programs put in place, and yet here we say, well, if you're mentally ill, you could just choose to have a doctor get you out of here.
This is taking us in again further down the slippery slope, and it's going to change again our thinking in society, because there has been, as long as I can remember, there's always been efforts at suicide prevention. You see ads on TV, you get the hotline number, call us if you're feeling depressed, you feel suicidal. There have been resources, mental health experts, people working to stop suicide, trying to help people who are in despair, depression. And as long as I can remember, that's been a strong, solid push. But what we're going to see next March, now we're going to have suicide provision for those same people who are, that we were trying to reach and to try to stop them. Now it's going to turn everything around. It's going to be upside down. The thinking is now going to shift. And we're going to say, well, we have to provide them with suicide now. And there's this conflict. And because the courts in 2015 with the Carter decision, because they framed euthanasia as a right in their decision, now to try to stop euthanasia or suicide, you're interfering with a right. You're maybe infringing on a right. And there's going to be this, like we've seen with abortion. We saw this in abortion where there's this perception it's a right, even though there's nothing that says it's a right in Canadian law or even in the courts. But there's this perception that it's a right. And a lot of other laws and other, discourse has been based on that. And we see that with the buffer zones, the bubble zones around abortion clinics, hospitals that have been set up in most provinces, because we are told we're not to interfere with a woman's right to have an abortion. And so there's more and more restrictions on the pro-life message to try to dissuade and discourage and protest abortion. And I don't see how we can, how it's going to be any different with euthanasia, trying to stop people from committing suicide, from being killed, because it will be seen as interfering with their fundamental right to to die. So this is where we're heading.
As you point out in the book, it doesn't take long, especially when money's involved and power and egos and things like that. It doesn't take long before a right to die becomes a duty to die, and for the good of the country, because you've come to the end of your what someone would term a useful existence. Hitler referred to people who were not able to contribute much in production as useless eaters. And so, like you said, when someone reaches that stage of life, they may begin to question their own value, and they need to be encouraged in what they are still contributing as a person, just in relationships and so on. Many things that they can still contribute, even if they're not able to hammer nails or shovel snow anymore, something like that.
Right. People can pray.
Yeah.
That's invaluable. So.
And not only the duty to die, but the duty to kill, because doctors, we just saw the failure of the Bill C-230, Kelly Block's bill that would have given doctors the right to refuse to participate in an act of killing an innocent human being. And that bill was defeated by primarily the Liberal, NDP, Green Bloc coalition of left-leaning, the death culture that is in Parliament today.
Right. And that was, that bill 230, it's such a basic principle. We already have, we should have an acknowledgement of our constitutional right to freedom of conscience and belief. It's already there, but we do see in different provinces, the colleges of physicians saying to their doctors, you need to be involved in killing, either directly, or if not, then making a direct, effective referral to a doctor who will kill, which is making you an accomplice to the act. And they're not giving doctors, and nurses and others the freedom that they have, that we should have. So this bill 230, it was kind of just a very obvious type of a bill. Everyone should agree. It's amazing to think that the Liberals, who often talk about your bodily autonomy and your personal rights and such, that they would object to your right to conscience. That's what's happened, and they don't there's only one province in Canada, Manitoba, that has any meaningful protection for doctors in terms of conscience rights there, in terms of euthanasia. But and
those doctors stood together and were willing to give up their medical careers, their licenses, to protect that right. And God bless them for taking that principled stand. This was several years ago. But I wish that would happen across the country that way.
Yeah, if doctors banded together and stood up, that would make a difference for sure.
Yeah.
But it's hard to, when you have the force of government and culture pushing against you, and the force of law. Yes.
The media and generally what's being promoted, not only I'm going to say the media in general, but entertainment media, the feel-good lifestyle that is being promoted across the country by every form of entertainment, and sports and that type of thing. Basically, if you're in good shape and you're setting records, you're winning goals, you're scoring goals, winning games, then you're highly esteemed. When you can no longer do that, you kind of go out to the trash heap. And if you're not beautiful, handsome, strong, resilient, articulate, you sort of don't have the same place of honor in society as those who fit in those categories. And that's tragic, because every human being is unique. Every human being has value, and we will continue to honor that.
Certainly. We're in very prejudiced times right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to hold this book up one more time. Trudeau's MAiD Service, a Euthanasia Program for Canada, by David Cooke. And David, first of all, I'm going to get you to tell us how people can get a hold of a copy of the book. But before we do that, anything that we have not covered that we should have covered in this topic? Yeah,
I mean, my main point is that this issue is really it's exploding, and Canada has one of the most permissive regimes right now in terms of euthanasia. I believe it is the most permissive all across the world, and it's being expanded. We need to realize what's happening, for one, and then we need to speak out and get our politicians to listen. Interestingly, yesterday I just received a letter back from Pierre Polievre. Part of the reason for writing my book, I've got my copy here, is to get it into the hands of MPs. So I have been launching a fundraiser to help me get a book to every single MP. And I've raised about $700, which is let me get it to all the Conservative MPs. And one of the first ones I sent was to, the leader of the opposition, Poilievre. And he actually got the book, and he apparently read it, and he wrote me a letter back. And you know what? Though he didn't say he's going to stop MAiD if he gets to be in power, he did say that he opposes it for mental illness, and he said that he doesn't want to see it expanded, and he believes that you need consent, so you shouldn't be dealing with minors. So he made some commitments, and so that's good. And he said palliative care should be prioritized. So, that's one thing that I feel really good about, that, if we can get the politicians to make some commitments and sign their name, and we can hold them to account on that, and maybe try to challenge them to go a little further. So, I mean, that's one thing I want to see happen. And so I was glad to see that. But if we can get the book out there and get it into more people's hands. So many Canadians don't even know what MAiD is. They use this euphemism MAiD. It sounds so harmless. Who wouldn't want a MAiD? I mean, I could use a MAiD in my house. I mean, my wife and I would love to have some MAiD service here, but this is killing. So Canadians need to be aware what's happening to our healthcare system, the corruption happening. So I guess that's really what this is all about. Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you, David, for writing this book, Trudeau's MAiD Service. And how can people get a hold of you or get a copy of the book? Right. It is available on Amazon. I was very happy to find that it actually was a top 30 bestseller a couple of weeks ago. So that it did rise in the bestseller list. And so you can go to amazon.ca and type in Trudeau's MAiD Service, and you'll find it there. Also, the ministry that is publishing it is Baptist House, which that's basically my ministry, personal ministry. So you can go to baptisthouse.org, and you'll be able to get it through there, which is I'll get it to you if you write to me through there. And you can also find out how you can help us get it into the hands of MPs. You can make a donation through that site. And of course, you can contact Campaign Life Coalition, and they will be able to connect you. And that's campaignlifecoalition.com. Excellent. Well, David Cooke, thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for writing this marvelous little book. I remind people that it is a short book. It's an easy read, but it's hard. It's hard to read in the sense of it's painful to come to grips with where Canada's at today. But it's not a long book, and so you should get one. And get one for your friends, get one for your MP, or hand it off to your MLA or MPP, your city council people. Make sure that people have a copy of this book and understand what's happening in Canada, what the culture of death is doing, and what we have to do as a culture of life to bring a different answer. And just remind folks who may not know or have forgotten, the Christian Heritage Party, which I represent, supports the protection of innocent human life from conception to natural death. So we do not have any, in our party, we do not give any credence to the idea that we should be killing people with or without their consent. It's God who decides when we're born and when we die, and we should leave it in His hands. We can trust Him to make the best decision for us. So God bless you, David. Thank you again. And I again encourage folks to try to get a copy of this book as soon as you can. You will find it very informative. Thanks.
Thank you, Rod. God bless you too. We really appreciate the work of Christian Heritage Party, the only truly pro-life party in Canada.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Bye-bye.